What exactly is a grit? Happy Hump Day and a hearty welcome to one and all. This is episode number 117 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this very pleasant Wednesday, late afternoon, early evening here in New York. If you're joining me on the YouTube channel and haven't done so already and are enjoying the content, click like, subscribe, comment, turn on those notifications. Or if you're catching episode 117 on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, click like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. So the question with which I opened this episode, what exactly is a grit, is asked by Mr. Gambini, Vincent or Vinny Gambini, the lead character in the classic 90s comedy My Cousin Vinny, which opened on this day, 1992, March 13, 1992. And I went to the movies that night, but I didn't see My Cousin Vinny. I saw a couple of friends at the old movies at Sunrise Mall, but I believe I watched a movie with Mickey Rourke and Sam Jackson and Willem Dafoe. How do you like the vacation so far? White Sands was my choice of movie that evening. Not very good. I should have seen My Cousin Vinny. So Joe Pesci, the star of My Cousin Vinny, was in the midst of really an extraordinary run, which pretty much came from nowhere. Now, Joe Pesci was somebody who famously plays Jake LaMotta's brother in Raging Bull, opposite Bobby D, Mr. De Niro, in one of his signature performances. Pesci really wasn't doing that much for most of the 80s. He was in, I believe, Easy Money with Rodney Dangerfield. Like, it's not that he wasn't working, but he wasn't doing the kind of work that he was capable of. We'll put it that way. Sometimes the scripts don't just come your way. And then all of a sudden, he shows up out of nowhere in Lethal Weapon 2 and steals the movie right out from under its stars, Mel and Danny, as Leo gets whatever you want, Leo gets. Okay. It's a fantastic performance where his character is presented in a bit of a clownish, buffoon sort of way, but clearly he's not stupid. He wouldn't have gotten to the position that he has gotten to if he were stupid. He just is a little bit of an aggravating, irritating kind of a personality, but Pesci carries it off marvelously. And then he appeared in the 2 sequels from there, and he steals every scene he's in. But Pesci went from and he got a lot of acclaim. See, Lethal Weapon 2 was a big box office hit. That was the same summer as Do the Right Thing. It was the same summer as Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Batman, Tim Burton, Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, Star Trek V, which didn't really do that well, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Parenthood, Ghostbusters 2. I mean, that was a crazy summer at the movies. Karate Kid 3. Use the crane, Danny boy. Use the crane. But Pesci went from Lethal Weapon 2. He played a small role in a film which got a lot of acclaim in some quarters, but it didn't really do what a lot of people expected. Betsy's Wedding, which was one of the last movies where Molly Ringwald played a big part in that kind of era, 80s, and that was 1990. But in 1990, Joe Pesci had 2 enormous movies that came out within the same range of one another in GoodFellas, for which he won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar, and then Home Alone, where he's a fucking scream. You talk about actors or actresses at the top of their craft, and one way you know is when they're able to give distinctive performances within the same time frame. And what Pesci does in GoodFellas, what he does in Home Alone, I mean, that's talent. He didn't make it by accident. He didn't win that Oscar accidentally. And after winning the Oscar, he was in a movie called The Super, which was not really that successful. I mean, it's kind of funny. It has its moments. and then he plays a pretty important, a surprisingly large supporting role in Oliver Stone's JFK, wearing just this unbelievable wig. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. As much as a lot of it is gobbledygook, it's still cinematically an extraordinary film. But Pesci was just working. He was working so much. And he shot Lethal Weapon 3 that came out in 92, June, right around the same time as My Cousin Vinny, which came out March 13th. And My Cousin Vinny is a movie that it shouldn't be as successful as it is. But here's the irony. There are two other brand name movies which came out within 2 weeks of one another. And this is something that history shows us it happens. But for Gen Xers like myself, younger boomers, and elder millennials, this is a kind of thing, if you're a movie fan, that you can't help but get a little misty, a little bit of a smile while you tear up because you remember perhaps where you were in life. On March 13th, 1992, My Cousin Vinny opened. On March 20th, 1992, Basic Instinct opened. On March 27th, 1992, White Men Can't Jump opened. Those are three massive movies, not just from the box office perspective. Basic Instinct, for the record, and this I couldn't believe, I looked it up, $353 million worldwide gross for Basic Instinct. That is insane. This movie's not that good. I love Sharon Stone, and I love Michael Douglas. The movie's not that good. It's okay. It's a passable psychological, erotic thriller. Hollywood was big on erotic thrillers during that era. Big budget films, erotic thrillers. Final Analysis with Richard Gere and Kim Basinger and Uma Thurman came out a little bit earlier that year. Big on erotic thrillers, Hollywood. But Basic Instinct was a worldwide, it was one of the top hits of 1992 from a financial perspective, because that's the kind of movie that plays overseas. And it was directed by the Dutchman, Paul Verhoeven, not surprisingly. And the mystery does hold you. It's beautifully shot. The music by Jerry Goldsmith, a composer I've mentioned before and will mention repeatedly, because he's like the least well-known of the great master composers, the John Williams, Bernard Herrmann, James Newton Howard, James Horner, of that level, Hans Zimmer. Jerry Goldsmith fits right in there, and he is just as good as anybody who ever composed film music, but that's beside the point. Goldsmith's score is fantastic for Basic Instinct. And I love the performances. Movie is just okay. Give it a marginal thumbs up. It's not great. But you would think, because My Cousin Vinny is a comedy, and a successful comedy, and it hit the ground before those other two movies. If I didn't know, I would have thought that it was at least as big a hit, if not more than certainly White Men Can't Jump, which is also a comedy. And I knew that Basic Instinct was a worldwide hit. I didn't know that it rolled up 350 plus million. That's just a sick tally for 1992. I mean, do the math, do the inflation adjustment. That is a crazy level of box office for the time. White Men Can't Jump significantly outgrossed My Cousin Vinny. White Men Can't Jump, actually, the worldwide gross was near to 100 million, and My Cousin Vinny made it to 65. It's a good number, but given how well remembered the film is, and the fact the film was a financial success, and Joe Pesci was very popular, having come off that Oscar win not that long prior, and Home Alone not that long prior, you would have thought that it would have been an even bigger hit. So the movie, for those who are familiar, it's the kind of movie that you can watch again and again because the actors all hit their marks. Marisa Tomei, Best Supporting Actress Oscar for her role as Mona Lisa Vito, the fiancée of Joe Pesci's Vincent Gambini, or Vinny, and Ralph Macchio years after Karate Kids 1, 2, and 3, and now we're 3 years after Karate Kid 3, which was summer 89. Now you have Ralph Macchio in a small-ish role as, basically the cousin of Joe Pesci, Vincent Gambini. And a ridiculous scenario that Ralph's character and his friend, I guess, a crazy scenario in which they get mistaken for two people who committed a terrible crime at a convenience store, the sack of suds. They're screwed. They're in the middle of nowhere in a town that doesn't really give a shit whether they actually did it or not. The car looked like it was them. There's a ballpark resemblance. Oh yeah, it was definitely them. They need an attorney. And as Ralph Macchio famously says in the trailer, my Cousin Vinny! Joe Pesci inhabits the center of the film. He is a kind of a shambling wreck of a man who it has taken him a lot of tries to pass the bar. And you hear that from people, whether it was then, whether it was now. They don't give out those JDs. They don't give away the game on the bar exam. It is a serious test, as is the CPA exam, as is the Series 7. But the Joe Pesci performance, it is a full-blown, fully realized comedic performance. The character has 3 dimensions, as does Marisa Tomei for all of her grandstanding. My biological clock is ticking like this. That's basically what won her the Oscar, was that where she's just losing it. My biological clock is ticking like this, either this or that. But Pesci, for all of his faults and for all of his bizarre tactics in court, he turns out to be a really skilled trial lawyer. He's good at stuff that they can't necessarily teach you in school. He's sharper than he appears. And he pulls off a couple of scams on Herman Munster, a.k.a. Fred Gwynn, as the judge. He pulls off a couple of scams where if he would have gotten caught, he would have probably not only been disbarred, gone to jail, and Ralph Macchio's character is fucked. He takes calculated risks throughout the story, and he has the chops to pull them off. He has the intelligence, despite the unpredictable nature of his courtroom and this kind of theatrics and all of the stuff that he does. And so we go through this story, and it's to the movie's credit that we don't actually know if the young men committed the crime. Now, we assume they didn't because we're in a comedy. And let me tell you, it would have been, I don't even think that Tarantino would have had it, that we have this lighthearted comedy, and then all of a sudden, well, no, the kids actually committed the murder. Ralph plays Bill. I forgot his name, Bill Gambini. And then the other, his friend is Stan. And the prosecuting attorney, they even scooped, they went deep to get a perfect actor for the prosecuting attorney. The prosecuting attorney is played by, his name is Lane Smith, and you might not know him by name, but you know him by face. And Lane Smith got an incredible amount of acclaim for a miniseries he did about Nixon, which I want to say came out in either 1989 or 90, called Final Days. And his performance was so strong in that miniseries that he suddenly had the pick of these kinds of roles. Kind of a bit of a showboating prosecuting attorney in My Cousin Vinny. He was in Son-in-Law with Pauly Shore. He did a number of movies in that era where he played the genteel Southerner and did it beautifully. But what the movie does, and that Lane Smith has the chops to pull it off, is that his character is set up. He is an antagonistic character because he is trying to put these boys, I mean, is it the death penalty? Is it the gas chamber? What are we talking about? Firing squad in this town? Who the fuck knows? But he's presented as he will win at all costs. Or maybe not. Maybe he actually is convinced that these two guys committed the crime. And if information comes out that shows that they don't, he's not going to push forward. And we've certainly seen movies where that's not what happens, where the characters are so bloodthirsty and cutthroat where they really don't give a shit whether rules are bent or broken. And I'm thinking specifically, same decade, a number of years later, Jon Voight's character in The Rainmaker, he knows damn well that the insurance company should be paying for this, and he is going down, he will go down with the ship. He's being paid to do a job. He doesn't want to, get shown up by this young punk or get humiliated, and he will go down with the ship. He will not reach a moment where he says, enough's enough. this trial sucks, we suck, and it's over. It's to my cousin Vinny's credit that we don't know the exact mechanics of what happened. And we also don't know how Joe Pesci's character, who seemingly continues to get in deeper and deeper shit because of the number of lies that he has to tell at various points of the movie just to continue as the attorney. And with all of this madcap, the antics and the funny stuff where neither Marisa Tomei nor Joe Pesci's character can get any sleep, and the fish out of water stuff where they don't know the local food, what exactly is a grit? Oh, it's made of corn. There is this sense of legitimate tension and stress that the movie engenders in the viewer, because for all the laughs, there's a lot at stake here. And maybe this is a black comedy. Maybe this is not going to go the way that we expect. Maybe it's going to go darker and that's what to me is so great. Because, for example, I love White Men Can't Jump. I might do an episode on White Men Can't Jump, March 27, 1992. But White Men Can't Jump, it's a comedy. It is a fall-down funny comedy. It has huge laughs, as does My Cousin Vinny. For a courtroom drama, that's not really normally a source of humor. But White Men Can't Jump, the stakes aren't as high. No one's life is at stake. There is money at stake. There is pride. There is basketball fever. There is the two main characters in that movie of Wesley Snipes, Sidney Dean, and Woody Harrelson's Billy Hoyle. They have probably a very contentious friendship is how I would say it. They're always trying to one-up each other. And you don't know how that movie is going to go. But you also know, well, nobody's on trial for murder. How far are these guys going to go to hang these boys? What are we talking about here? My Cousin Vinny, you never lose sight of the stakes and how critical it is that Vincent Gambini figure out a way to show that his cousin, Bill, and his friend Stan did not commit these terrible crimes of which they are accused, of which the prosecuting attorney is convinced they've done it. And there were some really great scenes between Joe Pesci and Lane Smith. And Lane Smith's character he wants to win. But when Joe Pesci begins to rise in court, you see that Lane Smith, as the attorney, he likes it. Because now we have a fight. Now we have a real trial, and maybe these guys will end up being innocent. Because the first part of the movie, it's just bad news being piled up on top of bad news, and Joe Pesci ending up being in contempt of court over and over and spending a night in prison. Well, at least he can sleep in prison and all of this kind of stuff. Another thing the movie does, I don't believe that, I believe the filmmaker is Jonathan Lynn, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't think that when the movie was in production or when they were, Jonathan Lynn, I don't think that the studio necessarily was saying this young actress, Marisa Tomei, Best Supporting Actress. She got such wide acclaim when the movie came out. And it was very, as I say, it made money at the box office, but it also did well with critics. It's in the 80s on Rotten Tomatoes. Might even be in the upper 80s. But Marisa Tomei's performance, so many different critics talked about her in their reviews, Siskel and Ebert. If you go back and you Google, you go on YouTube, you will see that they were talking about how great she was, that she was like a breath of fresh air. You're not expecting it. And yeah, she has the "my biological clock is ticking like this" moment. But the fact that her character is nothing like what she seems, if you just go by the surface, she's a stereotypical, she could be on Jersey Shore if you just go by the surface. Big hair, big attitude, big mouth. That's the surface. It turns out there's a lot more to Mona Lisa Vito than we think. And the movie uses her in a way that we don't expect. Another reason why the film is so successful, because it sets up this terrible scenario where the boys appear to be screwed, and it's the woman who saves the day. A character we think is extraneous, that she's just in there because she's the fiancée, and she's there for comic relief, to be Joe Pesci's foil and for him to be her foil at different points of the story. But when it turns out she has critical information, man, Marisa Tomei fucking kills it. when she's on the stand, you think I'm hostile now? Wait till you see me tonight. You two know each other? She's my fiance. Well, that explains the hostility. Exchanges are gold. But Marisa Tomei, to me, earned her best supporting actress. And there was controversy. There's always controversy, but there was a specific controversy at these Oscars. Jack Palance, who had won supporting actor the prior year for City Slickers. Was he really worthy? I don't know. I love Jack Palance. I don't know. But Jack Palance on stage announcing the award for Best Supporting Actress reads the list of nominees, and Marisa Tomei was the last name that he read. Palance made a joke that was kind of wrong. The joke didn't have the right information, where he basically said that the supporting actresses, 4 were from Britain and 1 was from Brooklyn. And Judy Davis is Australian, so he got that wrong. But the urban legend goes that Jack Palance simply he repeated the name Marisa Tomei instead of actually naming Best Supporting Actress. The urban legend holds that it was either Miranda Richardson or Judy Davis that was the actual winner. Bullshit. I watched the video. Jack Palance is doing it right, and that urban legend is false. And as we saw a number of years ago, if there is actually a mistake where somebody reads the wrong name, the accountants, just like my dear old dad, the C and SCF and Co., the guys at Price Waterhouse or KPMG or whoever's doing it now, they will go out on stage and say, sorry, it was Miranda Richardson. Sorry, Marisa, give us back the Oscar. She won it fair and square on the strength of her performance. And there's always discussion of what constitutes a lead performance, what constitutes a supporting performance. Marisa's role in this movie is perfectly calibrated. It is a supporting performance. It's Joe's movie. It's Vincent Gambini's story. But Mona Lisa Vito ends up being way more important to this particular story than we expect. And the way that she carries it off is just wonderful. The future Aunt May crushes it. And Joe has his, if you want to call it redemption, I don't know if it's really a redemptive arc, but the fact that it took him so long to pass the bar and nobody's taking him seriously, and then that transformation in court where he finally gets his sea legs under him, so to speak, and starts showing it's not about how many times it takes to pass the bar. Because once you get in there, you get into that courtroom, you're either going to sink or swim. And a terrific old actor, Austin Pendleton, plays the first attorney, and he's a guy presumably with great credentials. He is a terrible trial attorney, and we see it. That's how Vincent Gambini ends up taking over for both Bill, Ralph Macchio, and his friend Stan, who are on trial. And it is one of those movies, it's very special to us Gen Xers, even though, horror of horrors, I saw Basic Instinct in theaters the following weekend, and White Men Can't Jump in theaters the week after that. I did not see My Cousin Vinny in theaters the night that I fucking punted and watched White Sands because, it's a thriller. It looks interesting. Well, it was visually really nice. And that era, Mickey Rourke was still, doing good work, and Willem Dafoe and Sam Jackson going batshit crazy in that movie. Should have seen My Cousin Vinny. But for me personally, that was a time in my life which was very, very difficult. It was my senior year in high school. This was the last months. I was soon to be more or less forcibly ejected from the home in which I grew up. A lot of things were going wrong. And movies were an escape. In this case, going to the movies. I was going to the movies at least once a week, something that I did not do at any previous time in my life. And I ended up doing while I was at NYU and just after. But it was unusual for me to always go to the movies on Friday and Saturday. But at this particular critical juncture, it was something I needed. I needed the stress relief. I needed the space. And I just needed time to not worry about my own bullshit and just laugh and relax. And even in something like Basic Instinct, it's 2 hours where you can shut your brain off because there really isn't very much thinking that would go on in that movie. But Joe Pesci, after My Cousin Vinny, went on to do, now he has and many of you know this, he has a cameo role in A Bronx Tale, which is very well remembered. And, he starred in the movie. It's a movie that, again, it's a Generation X film called With Honors in '94, which didn't do well at the box office. It's now almost 30 years old. But it was a young Brendan Fraser and Patrick Dempsey and I think Moira Kelly and Josh Hamilton, not the baseball player. And the movie, I thought, I really like that movie. It goes in places you're not expecting it to, and Brendan's performance is strong. Patrick Dempsey, just whatever he's in, especially in that decade, when he stopped playing leads in kind of action movies and started playing supporting roles in films like With Honors, Outbreak, Patrick Dempsey is just money. He is great, whatever he does, whatever he's in. Even in the movie Thanksgiving last year, as absurd as that movie was, he came to play. He was bringing it. But My Cousin Vinny is a great film comedy. One of the few courtroom comedies. There have been a few here and there, but it's not really the substance for laughs in most cases. We think of Anatomy of a Murder, A Few Good Men, and movies in that ballpark. Presumed Innocent, Harrison Ford, a little bit earlier in the same decade. That's about a year and a half prior. Straightforward thriller. That's almost, if you combined elements of Basic Instinct with My Cousin Vinny, you would get Presumed Innocent. But Pesci's performance is solid. It doesn't have the affectation of a so-called movie star performance. He's still coming across like a character actor. Another reason why it works. If anything, Marisa Tomei, knowing that her screen time was somewhat limited, or at least big moments, she takes full advantage. She gives a bit of a movie star performance, but it suits her character, who is a big personality. It all works. And the moments towards the end of the film between Fred Gwynne as the judge and Joe Pesci and Lane Smith as the prosecuting attorney, who has, you can tell, a deep respect for the way that Pesci's character just rose and then just continued to rise as the story, unfolded. It's just a really good movie, and one that it's timeless, because there's nothing in this particular story where you'd say, oh, it's very dated. Yes, the characters don't have cell phones and can't immediately Google information. So there are some younger people that might get hung up on the fact that Joe Pesci is getting information out of a book that literally looks like War and Peace. But the story is still tight, and it will surprise you, and you will be scratching your head trying to figure out, well, I don't understand how can this possibly turn out okay? Well, the magic of movies, and the magic of this movie in particular. 32 years ago today, with me still a senior at Massapequa High School, My Cousin Vinny, directed by Jonathan Lynn and starring Joe Pesci as Vincent Gambini and Marisa Tomei as Mona Lisa Vito and Ralph Macchio as his cousin, Bill Gambini. With that, we've reached the end of episode 117 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me so much. And if you're catching up with episode number 117 on the YouTube channel, don't forget to click like, subscribe, comment, turn on those notifications. Or if you caught this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, if you enjoyed the content, click like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 118 real soon.